Imagine leaping 60 feet across, like a subterranean lake of rising lava, and then you're just sprinting straight up a sheer vertical stone wall.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then you catch a magically infused 200-pound morning star with your bare hands, completely neutralizing its momentum.
Just stopping it dead.
Exactly. Just stopping it dead
Yeah.
and then tossing all that kinetic energy right back at your attacker. I mean, in most tabletop role-playing scenarios, pulling off something like that is, well, it's the culmination of an entire party's coordinated effort.
Yeah, you'd be burning through high-level spells.
Oh, absolutely. High-level spells, once-a-day abilities, all of it. But today, we're going to show you how a single, highly specialized character does all of that in about 6 seconds of in-game time.
Which, I mean, it fundamentally changes how we perceive the limitations of a martial character.
Yeah.
We are looking at an absolute masterclass in spatial geometry, action economy, and frankly, sheer kinetic physics.
Welcome to this special Theater of the Mind deep dive. Today, you are joining us for a really ambitious mission. We are taking a massive stack of source material. So we're talking the 2024 Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, Monsters of the Multiverse, and all the deep, dark lore of Waterdeep and the Dungeon of the Mad Mage module.
That's a lot of reading.
It is so much reading. But we are combining all of that with a highly tactical, custom character playbook. This playbook belongs to a hero named Amon of Dragonsmere. And look, our goal here isn't to just read you a spreadsheet of stats. That's boring.
Right, no one wants that.
Our goal is to translate the complex mathematical language of that playbook into a visceral, living, breathing narrative adventure.
Yeah, and to give you the best possible translation of these sources, we're going to role-play the breakdown. You will be stepping into the shoes of the player alongside the host here, who is piloting Amon, and I will take on the role of the Dungeon Master. Exactly. Together, we are going to guide Amon and you, the listener, through a harrowing, completely randomized adventuring day deep beneath the city of Waterdeep. We'll be utilizing the updated 2024 rule set to show you how the mechanics on the page, like things labeled deflect attacks or elemental attunement, actually look and feel when applied to a dynamic physical environment.
And we have a sequence of encounters ahead of us that will just push this character to his absolute limits. We got 6 short-term goals we're hitting today.
Right, the adventuring day structure.
Exactly. We'll start in the city above to secure a commission, plunge into the dungeon for a brutal ambush, navigate these really lethal architectural traps, survive an onslaught of maddened beasts, conquer a vertical agility challenge that would honestly make a rogue weep, and finally face off against a horrifying magical anomaly in the deepest caverns.
A full day of work.
A very full day. And we are going to do all of this while strictly tracking Amon's resources. So no infinite health pools, no convenient long rest to reset his abilities, just pure tactical survival.
And, well, you need the right tool for a survival run like this. Let's look at the character primer before we jump in. Amon of Dragonsmere is a 6th level Githyanki monk.
Way of the elements, right?
Specifically a way of the elements, yes. And when you synthesize his racial traits, his monastic tradition, and his equipment, his capabilities are just staggering. I mean, he has a base movement speed of 45 feet per round.
Which is incredibly fast.
It's basically a car. He boasts an armor class of 20, which is derived from his high dexterity and wisdom, plus the magical bracers of defense he wears on his forearms.
Right.
He is armed with a quarterstaff of the acrobat, an energy bow, and an absolute arsenal of psionic and elemental powers.
And I think, it's the intersection of those psionic and elemental abilities that makes him so uniquely dangerous. So DM, the stage is yours. Pull us into the fiction. Where exactly does this descent begin?
All right, let's set the scene. We begin in the Castle Ward of Waterdeep, the Crown of the North. Specifically, you are standing just inside the heavy oak doors of the Yawning Portal Inn. It is the classic, and I want you to really step into this environment. The air is thick, right? It's radiating the heat of roaring hearths and smelling heavily of roasted meat, spilled ale, and stale wood smoke.
Okay, I'm there.
The ambient noise is practically deafening, just a chaotic symphony of 100 adventurers, merchants, and mercenaries shouting over one another. But your attention, and really the attention of almost everyone in the room, is drawn to the center of the tavern floor. Dominating the space is a massive, 40-foot wide stone well.
But it's not for water.
No, it doesn't hold water at all. It plunges straight down, just a sheer dark drop into the yawning blackness of Undermountain, which is the most notorious dungeon in the Forgotten Realms.
So Amon is standing near the periphery, just absorbing the chaos. His wisdom is 17, so he isn't just seeing the room, he's reading it. He feels that cold draft constantly pulling down into that well, fighting the heat of the cavern. And he's looking for a very specific contact to secure a commission before he makes the descent.
Right. And your eyes scan the room and you find her. Leaning against a load-bearing wooden pillar near the bar is Yagra Stonefist.
Okay, Yagra.
She is a half-orc mercenary, heavily muscled, wearing scarred, well-oiled leather armor. Our source lore tells us she works for the Zentrum, the shadowy faction known as the Black Network.
Right, the mob, basically.
Basically the fantasy mob, yeah. Currently, she's being paid to act as a bodyguard for a Zent negotiator having a drink at a nearby table. But Yagra is visibly bored. She's tracing the rim of her tankard, just looking for an excuse to move.
So Amon walks up to her.
And as Amon approaches her, her eyes dart to your monk robes. She scoffs, clearly unimpressed by the aesthetic. She slaps her massive calloused hand onto the empty oak table beside her and challenges you to an arm wrestling match.
Nice.
She makes it clear she won't talk business with a soft surface dweller. You need to prove you have leverage.
Well, this is exactly the kind of physical negotiation Amon excels at. I sit down opposite her, rolling up the sleeve of my robe. Now, mechanically, you are calling for an opposed strength check, right? Specifically using the athletics skill.
Exactly.
So I look at Amon's character sheet. His strength score is 14. That translates to a +2 modifier. It's solid, above average for a human, but Yagra is a veteran half-orc mercenary whose entire livelihood depends on brute force.
She definitely has a significant advantage in raw muscle mass.
Right. But I am going to tap into a specific feature of Amon's Githyanki heritage. Astral knowledge.
Oh, the astral knowledge feature is incredibly flavorful in the 2024 update. It's not just a static number on a page anymore. Explain how this actually manifests in the narrative when you activate it.
Yeah, so the rule states that whenever Amon finishes a long rest, he can gain proficiency in one skill, one weapon, one tool, and one weapon mastery of his choice. So let's look at what happened during Amon's last rest before he walked into this tavern. When a Githyanki meditates, they don't just sleep. Amon reached his consciousness out into the astral plane, the timeless silver void where his people make their home. He sifted through the collective psychic echoes of his ancestors.
That is so cool.
Right. He found the memories of ancient Githyanki warriors, these gladiators who wrestled mind flayer thralls in the fighting pits of Tunarath. He essentially downloaded their physical prowess, their leverage techniques, and their sheer athletic muscle memory directly into his own nervous system.
Matrix style. I know Kung Fu.
Exactly like that. He chose to gain proficiency in athletics. So instead of rolling with just a +2, I add my +3 proficiency bonus. I'm coming to the table with a +5, fueled by the ghosts of my ancestors.
It is such a beautiful synthesis of lore and mechanics. You are taking a flexible proficiency feature and grounding it entirely in the reality of the character. So in the game, when the outcome of an action is uncertain like this, we resolve it with a d20 test. I'm going to roll a d20 for Yagra and add her athletics modifier. You roll for Amon.
All right, let's do it. I roll a 16. With my +5, that's a 21.
And Yagra rolls an 11. Even with her substantial strength, she falls short of a 21. Describe how this looks at the table.
Amon anchors his elbow on the scarred oak. He grips her hand. As Yagra surges forward, trying to slam his wrist down with brute force, Amon doesn't just resist. His eyes briefly flare with this faint, silvery astral light. He shifts his weight, employing a perfect thousands-of-years-old leverage technique he learned in his sleep.
It just absorbs it.
Yeah, he absorbs her momentum, twists his shoulder, and smoothly, almost effortlessly, pins her hand to the wood. The heavy oak table just shudders under the impact. Amon doesn't even break a sweat.
Yagra stares at her pinned hand for a full second, completely stunned. Then a massive grin breaks across her face. She throws her head back and barks out a laugh, rubbing her wrist.
All right, monk, she rumbles, her demeanor instantly shifting from dismissive to respectful. You've got iron in those bones. Let's talk business.
She respects the strength. Absolutely. She leans in, lowering her voice so it doesn't carry over the din of the tavern. She tells you there is a rival faction operating in the city, the Xanathar Guild.
Ah, the Beholders Guild.
Yeah, a massive criminal syndicate run by a deeply paranoid beholder. Recently, a gang of Xanathar's were-rats ambushed a Zentrim courier, stole a magical stone key of significant value, and retreated down the well into Undermountain to hide it. Yagra offers you a heavy leather pouch filled with dragons, the local Waterdavian slang for gold coins, and promises renown with the Black Network if you descend into the dungeon, eliminate the thieves, and return the key.
Okay, let me pause here and look at the underlying motivations because this feels like a moral contradiction.
How so?
Well, if I am playing Amon, a character defined by deep discipline and the philosophical balance of the way of the elements, why would I accept a bounty from the Zhentarim? Anyone who reads the Forgotten Realms lore knows the Zhentarim are not the good guys.
No, they are absolutely not.
Right. They are a ruthless, shadowy mercenary network involved in extortion, smuggling, and assassination. Aligning with them feels completely antithetical to a monk's path.
Well, if we look at this in a vacuum, yes, it seems contradictory. But when you integrate the broader political landscape detailed in the Waterdeep, Dragon Heist sourcebook, the context shifts entirely. Waterdeep is currently a powder keg.
Right, the gang war.
Exactly. The Zhentarim and the Xanathar Guild are locked in an escalating Cold War that is actively spilling into the streets. We are talking about were-rats, mind flayers, and thugs fighting in alleyways, putting thousands of innocent citizens at risk.
So it's not about endorsing the Zhentarim, it's about crisis management.
That's exactly it. Amon isn't joining their guild. He is making a highly pragmatic, almost surgical calculation. The Xanathar Guild, driven by a chaotic, paranoid monster, represents a much more immediate and destructive threat to the balance of the city. By taking this commission, Amon is utilizing the resources of one morally gray faction to cripple a definitively evil one.
I like that.
It is a deeply monastic approach, you know? You prune the diseased branch to save the tree. You embrace a small impurity to maintain the greater harmony of the environment.
That makes perfect sense. It's an act of necessary violence to preserve peace. So Amon accepts the heady pouch of gold, secures his gear, and walks toward the center of the tavern. He steps over the stone lip of the well and into the sturdy wooden winch bucket dangling over the abyss. He gives the barkeep a sharp nod.
And down you go.
Yeah, the massive gears groan, the thick iron chains rattle, and the bucket begins its descent. The warmth of the tavern fades away, replaced by the damp, oppressive chill of the deep earth. We are officially entering Undermountain.
The winch lowers you agonizingly slowly. You descend 140 feet, passing the deep cobblestone foundations of Waterdeep's sewer system until the bucket finally thumps onto solid rock. You step out into level 1, the dungeon level.
Goal 2 begins.
Here we go. The atmosphere down here is instantly hostile. The air is stagnant, smelling of ancient stone dust, mildew, and faint decay. You are standing in a massive, high-ceilinged room supported by thick, intricately carved stone columns. And, the Dungeon Master's Guide reminds us that every dungeon is a reflection of its creator's psyche.
And Hallister is insane.
Utterly insane. Undermountain was built by Hallister Blackcloak, the Mad Mage, an incredibly powerful wizard utterly obsessed with magical nodes who views adventurers as his personal playthings. The architecture itself is designed to mock you. For instance, carved deeply into the southeast wall in common are the words, "Certain death this way," accompanied by an arrow pointing toward a dark southern tunnel.
Typical Hallister. While I'm taking all of this in, Amon's passive perception is high. He's looking for the lie in the environment. What else is in this room?
Wrapped tightly around the upper half of the northernmost stone pillar is the colossal skeleton of a giant constrictor snake. In the dim light, it looks terrifying, like a trap waiting to spring.
But it's not...
No, it's completely motionless. It is just another piece of Hallister's psychological warfare. A harmless distraction meant to draw the eye upward. Because while you are looking at the ceiling, waiting behind the bases of the other pillars in absolute unnerving silence, are two bugbears.
I know the monster manual entries for bugbears. They are large, hairy goblinoids, incredibly muscular, but surprisingly adept at stealth and ambush tactics.
That is their standard profile, yes. But the module dungeon of the Mad Mage throws a horrific wrench into the standard monster ecology. These are not normal bugbears.
Oh, no.
They are hosts, nestled deep inside their skull cavities, wrapping their tendrils around the goblinoid's brain stems, are intellect devourers.
The brain dogs.
The brain dogs. These are alien brain-like entities that serve the mind flayers. They have consumed the original minds of these creatures and are now piloting their massive bodies like biological meat suits. Now, to resolve this encounter, we use the rhythm of play defined in the core rules. I, the DM, describe the scene. You, the player, describe your reaction. But because hostile intent is established, we immediately shift into the structured rhythm of combat. I am calling for initiative.
All right, so we roll our dexterity checks to determine the order of action.
Yes, and this is where the 2024 rules regarding surprise really come into focus. The bugbears were actively hiding behind the pillars, attempting to ambush you. This means they rolled a stealth check against Amon's passive perception. Given that these bodies are being driven by hyper-intelligent alien entities, they position themselves perfectly.
So they beat my passive.
They did. In the current rule set, if a combatant initiates a fight while hidden from a foe who is completely unaware, that foe is surprised. But it's not a skipped turn anymore. Mechanically, this means Amon suffers disadvantage on his initiative roll.
Right, which is much more forgiving than the old rules, but still tough. Even with this advantage, though, Amon is incredibly fast. His dexterity is 20, granting him a +5 modifier. Let's look at the dice. I roll 2 d20s and take the lower result. I roll a 14 and an 8. So we take the 8. With my +5, my initiative is a 13.
The bugbears, piloted by the intellect devourers, roll a 12.
Wow, just beat them.
Yeah, even caught off guard, Amon's reflexes are supernatural. As the massive goblinoids step out from behind the stone pillars, raising their spiked weapons, Amon reacts first. The element of surprise fails to paralyze him. What does Amon do?
Okay, I'm going to initiate what Amon's playbook refers to as the study and strike sequence. This is where the action economy of a monk truly outshines almost any other martial class. A turn is divided into distinct phases, right?
Yep.
Phase 1 is my evaluation. I have 2 massive targets, roughly 30 feet away. Phase 2 is movement. With my 45-foot speed, I use 15 feet to calmly walk forward, placing myself exactly equidistant between both pillars, right in the center of the room.
Okay, you're right in the middle of them.
Phase 3 is my action. Now, the overwhelming instinct for most players here is to draw a weapon and use the attack action. Just start rolling damage. But I am not going to attack. I am using the study action.
Oh, interesting. The study action is a brilliant explicit mechanic in the 2024 rules. It allows a character to make an intelligence check utilizing skills like Arcana, History, or Nature to recall critical information or deeply observe a target during combat. Tell me why Amon is doing this instead of immediately throwing punches.
Well, because Amon is a tactician. He has fought goblinoids before, but his high wisdom tells him something is fundamentally wrong with the scene in front of him.
Yeah.
Bugbears are usually aggressive, vocal, and driven by base instincts. These creatures are moving with a terrifying synchronized stiffness.
Like puppets.
Exactly like puppets. Their posture is rigid. They aren't blinking. I am rolling an intelligence check, applying my Arcana proficiency to analyze their physiology.
Yeah.
I want to know what I am actually fighting.
You roll the check and succeed. As they step into the dim light, Amon's sharp eyes catch the horrifying details. You see a faint, purplish, viscous fluid leaking from the ear canals of the bugbear on the left. You notice the cranial structure of the one on the right looks slightly distended, bulging unnaturally.
Gross.
Yeah, it's nasty. Your astral memories flare, recognizing the biological signature of the Illithid Empire. You realize instantly, these are infected hosts. Intellect devourers are at the wheel. This is vital tactile information. It tells Amon that attempting to use psychic intimidation or attacks won't work, and more importantly, it tells him that these bodies will likely fight until they are completely dismembered, as they no longer feel pain in a normal biological sense.
Which is exactly why knowledge dictates the strategy here. Now that I know what they are, I move to phase 4. My bonus action. I haven't dealt a single point of damage yet, but that changes now. Because Amon is a monk, his martial arts allow him to use Flurry of Blows. I tap into my Kier, or my elemental focus. I have a pool of 6 focus points. I expend 1 point, which allows me to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. But just before I roll to hit, I weave in a free action. As a Way of the Elements monk, I trigger elemental attunement.
Paint a picture of what that looks like in the fiction of the dungeon.
All right, Amon stops in the center of the room and exhales sharply, centering his breathing. The intricate geometric tattoos covering his arms begin to pulse with a searing, crackling blue-white light. By spending that focus point for the next minute, my physical strikes transcend my actual body. My unarmed strikes gain a 15-foot reach as arcs of pure elemental energy. I'm choosing lightning for this encounter whip outward from my fists and feet.
That is so cinematic.
It feels great. So standing 15 feet away from the bugbear on the left, completely out of its melee range, Amon throws 2 blistering punches into the empty air. The kinetic force of the punches rips the moisture from the air, manifesting his twin, jagged bolts of lightning that crack across the cavern and slam directly into the bugbear's chest.
The sound of thunder echoes off the stone pillars. You roll your martial arts dice. The lightning strikes deal significant damage. The air in the room instantly smells like ozone and burnt hair. The bugbear staggers, but as you predicted, it doesn't cry out in pain. It just recalibrates its balance.
Because of the brain dog.
Exactly. Your turn ends. It is now the bugbear's turn. The one you just hit lunges forward, covering the 15 feet with terrifying speed. It raises a massive iron-spiked morning star and brings it down in a sweeping two-handed arc aimed directly at your collarbone. It rolls an 18 to hit. Against your impressive armor class of 20, that is a miss. The weapon should sail past you, but
this is where we run into a lethal edge case in the 2024 rules. The weapon mastery system, specifically the Gray's mastery.
yes, the introduction of weapon masteries fundamentally changed how martial combat feels. Let's assume the bugbear's heavy morning star possesses the Gray's property. This mechanic dictates that even if the attack roll fails to bypass the target's armor class, the sheer weight, momentum, and sweeping nature of the weapon still clip the defender.
So it still hurt.
It deals guaranteed damage equal to the attacker's strength modifier. You manage to avoid the lethal spike of the weapon, but the heavy iron shaft still crashes into your shoulder. You are guaranteed to take damage.
And this is exactly where the monk's defensive toolkit completely breaks the traditional math of combat. I'm using my reaction for the round. My playbook details a sequence I call the deflect and retaliate combo. First, I trigger the core monk feature, deflect attacks. The rules state that when an attack roll hits me, or in this specific instance, when it deals that unavoidable graze damage, I can use my reaction to reduce the incoming bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage.
What's the math on that?
The formula is 1d10 plus my dexterity modifier, which is 5, plus my monk level, which is 6. So I am reducing the incoming damage by a massive 1d10 plus 11. That means I negate a minimum of 12 points of damage. The graze damage from a bugbear's strength modifier is likely a 3 or a 4.
So it's gone.
It is instantly reduced to 0.
Think about the physical analogy of what just happened. If a fighter blocks a blow with a shield, their arm still takes the shock. But Amon is operating like a perfectly engineered crumple zone on a high-performance vehicle. The massive iron morning star comes crashing down. Amon doesn't just step back, he steps into the strike's arc. He reaches out and catches the haft of the weapon with his bare hand.
Beautiful.
He perfectly aligns his skeletal structure, dropping his stance to instantly ground the entire kinetic force of the blow into the stone floor beneath his feet. The weapon stops dead in midair. Not a single point of damage transfers to his body.
And because my technique reduced the damage to exactly 0, the 2024 rulebook rewards me with an immediate counteroffensive. I trigger retaliate. As part of the exact same reaction, the rules grant me an immediate opportunity attack against the creature whose weapon I just caught.
So you're hitting them back instantly.
Instantly, I'm still holding the haft of its morning star. I use its own grounded momentum against it. I pivot, dropping my weight further, and execute a brutal, Savate-style leg sweep aimed at its lead knee. And I'm not just rolling for damage here. I am utilizing the push and shove effect built into the unarmed strike rules. The bugbear must immediately make a DC 14 strength saving throw to maintain its footing.
The intellect devourer driving the bugbear's nervous system cannot comprehend the physics of what just occurred. Its weapon is immobilized, and its center of gravity is violently compromised. I roll the saving throw for the bugbear. It rolls a 7. It fails miserably.
My sweep connects perfectly with the joint. I choose to knock the creature prone. The massive 7-foot-tall, 300-pound goblinoid is entirely upended. It crashes flat onto its back onto the hard dungeon flagstones, the morning star clattering uselessly out of its grip.
It is a masterclass in kinetic redirection. You caught a weapon that would have crushed a normal man, negated its force entirely, and used the enemy's own mass to ground them, all without using an action on your turn. You systematically dismantle the bugbears, crushing the alien brain creatures as they attempt to crawl out of the cracked skulls of their hosts. You wipe the purple ichor from your boots and push deeper into Undermountain. Following the magical resonance of the stolen key, you descend to level 2, the arcane chambers. This brings us to the first major environmental obstacle of the day.
All right, set the atmosphere for level 2. I've left the stone pillars behind. What is Amon walking into?
Level 2 of Undermountain is essentially a graveyard of failed magical experiments. It is infested with the lingering volatile magic of Hallister's mutated apprentices. The architecture here is twisted and non-Euclidean. You find yourself walking down a 10-foot wide, rough-hewn stone passage that slopes gradually downward. But the most pressing issue is visibility.
It's dark.
No, it's obscured. The floor is entirely obscured by a 2-foot-thick layer of eerie, swirling gray fog that clings heavily to the ground. You cannot see your own boots. You cannot see the floor tiles. The air temperature has dropped significantly, and it smells strongly of sour ozone and old decay.
This is a classic dungeon crawler nightmare. Even with my high passive perception, I cannot see through magical or heavy obscurement. Relying purely on eyesight here is how you end up dead. Amon is paranoid and methodical. I'm going to execute a 4-step tactical progression designed specifically for trap bypassing.
Okay, let's hear the progression.
Step 1 is detection. I unholster my magical weapon, the quarterstaff of the acrobat. I extend my grip to the very end of the wood, using it in what I call its 10-foot pole form. I begin walking incredibly slowly, physically probing the obscured floor ahead of me, sweeping the staff back and forth, feeling the vibrations of the stonework travel up the wood into my hands.
It's a slow, tense process. For the first 20 feet, the staff thunks solidly against bedrock. But as you sweep the staff forward on your next step, the wood strikes a section of the floor that sounds completely different. It lacks the dense reverberation of solid stone. It sounds, well, hollow, like a brittle shell.
A trap.
It's a breakaway floor panel. And hidden beneath that fragile tiling, completely obscured by the fog, is a 30-foot deep pit. The bottom is lined with jagged, poison-coated stone spikes. If a character falls in, they suffer 3d6 bludgeoning damage from the impact, plus an additional 3d6 piercing damage from the spikes, not to mention the poison. It is a literal meat grinder designed to punish the careless.
I freeze the moment I hear that hollow sound. Step 2 of my progression is remote manipulation. As a Githyanki, I possess an innate, at-will psionic ability called Mage Hand Legerdemain. Without uttering a word or making a sweeping gesture, I project my mind outward. I conjure an invisible telekinetic hand 30 feet ahead of me, hovering directly over the section of hollow-sounding tiles. I use the invisible hand to apply firm, downward pressure, perfectly mimicking the weight of a heavy-booted footstep.
The moment the telekinetic pressure is applied, the trap violently triggers. The structural integrity of the false floor shatters with a deafening grinding crunch. You hear massive stone tiles break apart and plummet into the darkness. A second later, the sharp, echoing crashes of stones smashing against iron spikes 30 feet below reverberate up the shaft.
Oh, wow.
The heavy gray fog at your feet immediately begins to swirl and pour like a waterfall down into the newly opened chasm. You have safely exposed a 30-foot wide open pit trap blocking the entire corridor.
Okay, step 3 is supernatural bypass. The pit is 30 feet across. Now, if we look at the standard rules for jumping, a running long jump is dictated by a character's strength score. Amon's strength is 14, meaning under normal physical circumstances, he could only jump 14 feet.
Which is less than half the distance required.
Exactly. He would plunge straight into the spikes. But I'm not relying on physical muscles. I use my bonus action to cast the spell jump. This is another innate psionic ability granted by my racial lineage, and crucially, it does not require my concentration to maintain. The updated 2024 rulebook includes a very specific mechanical execution for this spell that makes it incredibly powerful.
Yeah, let's examine the exact wording of the updated jump spell, because it fundamentally alters movement mechanics. The text states that once on each of your turns for the spell's duration, you can jump up to 30 feet by spending only 10 feet of your movement.
This is huge. It means I don't need a 10-foot running start to build momentum. I don't need to roll an athletics check and risk failing. I simply deduct 10 feet from my massive 45-foot movement pool, and I psionically launch myself across the void. Amon literally floats 30 feet through the air, completely clearing the chasm and the deadly spikes below, and lands perfectly balanced on the solid stone ledge on the far side.
It's an elegant solution. But let's pause and play what if, because dungeon delving is rarely flawless. Let's imagine a scenario where Amon was distracted.
Okay.
What if you hadn't used the staff? What if you had just sprinted into the fog, stepped directly onto the breakaway floor, and were actively plummeting into a 30-foot pit of poison spikes? Doesn't the rulebook state that whenever a character takes falling damage, they are automatically knocked prone? Being prone at the bottom of a spiked pit completely ruins your mobility and leaves you at the absolute mercy of whatever scavengers live down there.
This is exactly why the monk class design is so resilient. If I fall, I don't panic. I use my reaction to trigger slow fall. The core rule states that a monk can use their reaction when they fall to reduce any falling damage they take by an amount equal to 5 times their monk level. At level 6, that provides 30 points of guaranteed damage reduction.
Let's do the math on the danger. The 30-foot fall itself only generates 3d6 bludgeoning damage, The absolute maximum damage you could possibly roll on 3 6-sided dice is 18.
Exactly. So my slow fall feature mathematically guarantees that I reduce the impact damage of the fall to exactly 0. And here is the crucial interaction. The 2024 rules specifically state that a character only lands prone if they take damage from the fall.
Oh, that's a brilliant loophole.
Right. Because I reduced the damage to 0, I completely bypass the mechanical requirement to land prone. Think of it like a flawless parkour roll. I hit the bottom of the spikes pit, my boots touching down perfectly between the jagged iron spikes. I remain on my feet, and because I am a 6th level monk, my unarmored movement feature has upgraded. It allows me to move along vertical surfaces without falling during my turn. I would simply hit the bottom of the pit, let my momentum carry me forward, and run straight up the 30-foot vertical stone wall on the opposite side, flipping out of the trap without breaking stride.
That's exactly why this build is a nightmare for dungeon designers. You build a meticulously lethal pit trap, and the character treats it like a half-pipe. It's incredible. You easily bypass the arcane chamber's traps and locate a spiraling, naturally formed tunnel leading even further down into the earth. As you descend, the air grows incredibly foul, the temperature rises uncomfortably, and the thick stench of rotting meat, old blood, and feral musk signals your arrival at level 12, the maze level. This brings us to our next major encounter, the Horned King's Fog.
All right, set the atmosphere for level 12. The maze level sounds like a psychological trap. What does Amon experience down here?
It is deeply oppressive. The Dungeon Master's Guide outlines rules for regional effects, environmental anomalies caused by the presence of immensely powerful entities or concentrated magical madness. Down here, the fog you encountered earlier isn't just obscurement, it feels alive. It is agitated, swirling unnaturally around your ankles.
Like creepy.
The walls of the maze constantly echo with auditory hallucinations, the heavy rattling of spectral iron chains, the distant sounds of unseen old men giggling in the dark. It is mechanically harmless, but psychologically it is designed to fray your nerves. You are experiencing the regional effect of Hallister's fractured mind mixing with the abyssal energy of Baphomet, the demon lord of Minotaurs, who holds sway over this specific level.
And Amon is navigating this sensory nightmare. What is the immediate threat?
You hear them before you see them. The thunderous echoing of hooves on stone. Out of the swirling fog, charging down a 50-foot wide cavern directly towards you, come 7 minotaurs. 7. They are massive, heavily muscled beasts, and they have been driven entirely insane by the madness of Baphomet, a magical affliction that makes them believe absolutely every living creature is prey to be hunted and slaughtered. They boast high hit point pools, wield brutal, oversized gray taxes, and possess a terrifying ability to gore you with their horns if they build up momentum during a charge. 7 of them rushing a single 6th-level character in an open corridor is mathematically a highly lethal encounter.
Yeah, let's break down the reality of this situation. If I stand my ground and try to fight 7 minotaurs head-on, trading single-target melee strikes, it is suicide.
Completely.
It doesn't matter that my armor class is 20. The sheer volume of attacks, 7 gray taxes and 7 sets of horns, will eventually bypass my AC through the law of averages. They will overwhelm my action economy and crush me. Amon needs massive immediate crowd control. I'm going to initiate a sequence from my elemental playbook called the Sculpted Acid Cloud.
Walk me through the phases of this sequence. It sounds complex, and you need to execute it before they close the distance and gore you.
It requires precise timing, but it's incredibly efficient. First, my free action. I activate elemental attunement, but instead of lightning, this time I choose acid damage, shifting my elemental focus to something caustic.
Okay.
Second, before they get into melee range, I use my action to cast my elementalism cantrip. Specifically, I am utilizing the sculpt element option within the spell. The 2024 rules state I can shape a 1-foot cube of water or dirt. I use this minor magic to grab the heavy ambient moisture directly out of the agitated dungeon fog in front of me. I shape it into a crude, concentrated, stinging cloud of acidic mist, suspending it right at the Minotaur's eye level across the choke point of the cavern. It's not meant to deal damage. It's a sensory distraction, designed to disrupt their breathing and temporarily obscure their sight as they charge blindly forward.
It's a brilliant use of a utility cantrip. As the Minotaurs hit the acidic mist, they instinctively flinch. There's a momentary hesitation in their thunderous charge as they blink rapidly and snort the burning moisture from their snouts. Because of the choke point and their hesitation, they bunch up, clustering tightly together as they push through the cloud.
That cluster is exactly what I was engineering. That sets up phase 3. My main offensive strike. I use my 6th level subclass feature, elemental burst. I expend 2 focus points from my pool. I target a point on the ground right in the middle of their tightly packed cluster, which, given how fast they're moving, is practically at my own feet.
Oh, that's dangerous.
I detonate a 20-foot radius sphere of pure corrosive elemental acid. Every single creature within that massive sphere must make a dexterity saving throw or take damage equal to 3 rolls of my martial arts die. That translates to 3d8 acid damage instantly washing over them.
But let's look at the area of effect. Because you centered a 20-foot radius blast practically on yourself to ensure you caught all 7 charging beasts, you are caught squarely inside your own blast radius. You are forcing yourself to make the exact same dexterity saving throw.
I am. But this is where the tactical genius of the monk's defensive toolkit comes into play. On my previous turn, as I heard them approaching down the hall, I used my bonus action to spend 1 focus point on patient defense.
Oh, the dodge action.
Yes, this means I took the dodge action proactively. The mechanics of the dodge action grant me advantage on all dexterity saving throws. Furthermore, my base dexterity saving throw modifier is incredibly high. I roll the d20 twice and take the higher result, easily succeeding on the save. Now, the 2024 rules for Elemental Burst state that if a creature succeeds on the save, they take half damage. So I brace my body, utilizing my elemental attunement to weather the caustic backlash, allowing the acid to wash over me while completely melting the front line of the beasts. I take a minor amount of damage, but the trade-off is immense.
The visual is just stunning. A concussive blast wave of thick green acid obliterates the dungeon fog. The cavern echoes with the deafening roars of minotaurs howling in agony as their fur, leather harnesses, and skin violently sizzle and melt. Several of the weaker ones in the center of the blast drop instantly, their massive great taxes clattering heavily to the stone. The sheer area of effect damage shatters their formation, but 2 of the largest, most frenzied minotaurs manage to push through the dissipating acid cloud. Their eyes are wild, their hides are smoking, and they swing their axes at you with reckless, desperate fury.
I don't retreat. I use my extra attack. As the largest surviving minotaur charges me, I don't strike with my fists. I use my weapon, the quarterstaff of the acrobat. I drop low, slipping under the wild arc of its great tax, and perform a sweeping strike aimed at its ankles. I engaging the topple weapon mastery property of the staff. When I hit with a topple weapon, I target the creature's center of gravity, forcing it to make a constitution saving throw. If it fails, it is knocked prone.
Okay, I have to stop you there and act as a skeptical DM for a moment. Let's look at the reality of the fiction. Minotaurs are large-sized creatures. They weigh over a ton. Amon is a medium-sized Githyanki, weighing maybe 160 pounds. Can a median character actually physically knock a charging 1.5-ton bull monster flat on its back by hitting it with a wooden stick? Doesn't the rulebook explicitly forbid shoving massive creatures?
It's a great question, and it really highlights how crucial it is to read the exact wording of the 2024 updates. If we consult the general unarmed strike rules for pushing or shoving, you are absolutely correct. The rule states that attempting to shove a creature that is 2 or more sizes larger than you automatically fails. You can't just push a giant over. But I am not using an unarmed strike to shove. I am using a weapon mastery.
Okay, let me look. I'm pulling up the rulebook right now, and I see the distinction. If we look at the specific text for the topple weapon mastery property, it does not include a size restriction clause. It simply states that upon a hit, the target must make a Constitution saving throw. And one of the golden foundational rules of Dungeons and Dragons printed right near the beginning of the 2024 Player's Handbook is exceptions supersede general rules. The specific rule of the weapon mastery overrides the general rule of shoving.
Exactly. And narratively, it makes perfect sense if you understand martial arts. Think of it like Aikido, or striking the precise structural weak point of a bridge. Amon isn't trying to outmuscle the Minotaur. He is using the creature's own massive forward momentum against it. He strikes the absolute perfect pressure point on the back of the Minotaur's knee right as it shifts its weight, collapsing its structural support. The ton of forward momentum does the rest of the work.
It is a devastating, legally sound application of the rules. The Minotaur fails its Constitution save. You sweep the knee, the joint buckles, and the massive beast crashes violently onto its back, shaking the cavern floor. You dispatch the grounded creature with a swift strike, leaving the corridor silent except for the hiss of melting stone. You search the cavern and find a ruined drow skeleton clutching the magical stone key.
Goal accomplished.
You have secured the objective, you just need to extract. But as your hand closes around the key, the dungeon architecture magically and violently shifts. It's a classic Hal Lester Black Cloak trap. The solid floor beneath your boots simply ceases to exist. You are suddenly sliding down a steep, frictionless stone chute, tumbling blindly into the dark until you are unceremoniously dumped into level 15, the obstacle course.
That sounds ominous. What exactly is the obstacle course?
Level 15 is a dungeon designer's sadistic playground. It wasn't built to house monsters. It was built purely to dispose of high-level intruders in a highly entertaining theatrical way. You splash down onto a stone ledge in a cavernous room that is dominated by a gaping, bottomless chasm stretching 40 feet across. A massive iron wheel, likely a control mechanism, sits on a ledge nearby, but the stone floor between you and the edge of the chasm is meticulously littered with hidden teleport traps.
Oh, of course it is.
If you step on the wrong room-carved flagstone, you will be magically teleported, perhaps back to the start of the level, or directly into a spiked pit, or into a suspended iron cage.
Scan the room. Where's the exit?
The only way out of this chamber is a rusted ventilation shaft located 60 feet straight up in the sheer, smooth stone wall on the opposite side of the 40-foot chasm. And to escalate the tension, the moment you land, a deep, mechanical grinding noise echoes through the chamber. Heavy iron grates in the wall slide open, and glowing, superheated lava begins to rapidly flood the floor, a random, lethal dungeon hazard from the DMG. You have perhaps 10 seconds before the entire lower floor is completely submerged in molten rock. You must cross a rune-trapped floor, clear a 40-foot bottomless chasm, and climb 60 feet up a sheer vertical cliff face without touching the ground.
This is the ultimate agility challenge. This exact scenario is why you play a monk. I'm going to execute the most cinematic sequence in Amon's playbook, a maneuver I call the vertical siege, or the energy ladder. I need to generate an insane amount of movement and verticality in a single 6-second round.
Let's break down the math and the mechanics of this, because it sounds impossible for a standard character. How do you achieve this?
It's all about stacking movement multipliers and utilizing my unique equipment. My base movement speed is 45 feet, phase 1. My action: I don't run yet, I draw my energy bow, but I don't aim it at an enemy. I use the bow's feature to switch its damage type to force. I fire a rapid staccato flurry of glowing pure force arrows directly into the sheer stone wall across the chasm.
Okay, setting up points.
Right. I space them a few feet apart, driving the magical bolts deep into the bedrock. I am literally creating a series of glowing rungs made of hard light, forming a makeshift 60-foot ladder leading straight up to the ventilation shaft. Phase 2. My bonus action: I spend one focus point to activate Step of the Wind. This core monk feature does two things. It allows me to take the dash action as a bonus action, and it magically doubles my jump distance for the entire turn.
Let's calculate the exact movement you have available. Your base speed is 45 feet. Because you use Step of the Wind to dash, you add another 45 feet to your available movement for the turn. That gives you a total pool of 90 feet of movement to utilize.
90 feet is exactly what I need. Here's the sequence. I sprint forward, using 10 feet of movement to get a running start, carefully stepping between the visible teleport runes. I reach the absolute edge of the bottomless chasm. Now, because my jump distance is magically doubled by Step of the Wind, my normal physical long jump of 14 feet becomes 28 feet. But remember that jump spell I cast earlier in the arcane chambers?
Right, the psionic jump.
It has a duration of 1 minute. It is still active. The spell allows me to spend 10 feet of movement to jump 30 feet. Because Step of the Wind doubles all jump distances, that 30-foot magical leap becomes a 60-foot aerial launch.
The synergy there is incredible. Describe the leap.
I plant my boot on the very edge of the precipice and launch myself. I soar 40 feet through the hot air, completely clearing the bottomless chasm, sailing high over the deadly teleport traps and the rapidly rising lake of lava. I hit the far wall with punishing force, instantly grabbing the lowest glowing force arrow rung I created. I use my remaining 70 feet of movement pool to sprint straight up the vertical wall, utilizing my unarmored movement feature. I scale the 60-foot sheer cliff face in seconds, pulling myself into the rusted ventilation shaft and disappearing into the dark just as the lava fully consumes the floor below.
I want to pause and look at this from a dungeon master's perspective. You spend hours meticulously designing this room. You place the teleportation runes with geometric precision. You calculate the exact rising speed of the lava hazard. You build a terrifying bottomless pit. You construct a puzzle meant to challenge the player's problem-solving skills. And this Githyanki character literally creates his own staircase out of hard light, clears a 40-foot gap in a single bound, and runs up a sheer cliff face in 6 seconds, bypassing the entire puzzle. What does this mean for a DM? It means when you have a monk at the table, you have to fundamentally alter how you design encounters. You cannot rely on two-dimensional, floor-based hazards. You have to think in 3D.
It completely changes the geometry of the game. The floor is lava. That's fine, I don't use the floor. I tumble through the ventilation shaft, sliding down a steep, smooth stone pipe for what feels like miles, until I am violently ejected. I splash down heavily into the dark, freezing primordial waters of level 19. We have finally reached the climax of our descent, the caverns of ooze.
Level 19 is a massive submerged ecosystem. You pull yourself out of the freezing water, coughing up brackish fluid, and emerge into a colossal subterranean cavern holding a dark, still lake. The smell of ozone, rotting, waterlogged wood, and stagnant decay is overpowering. Floating silently in the center of the subterranean lake is a massive, derelict, spacefaring pirate ship called the Scavenger.
It's a spelljammer.
It's a spelljammer vessel, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hull rotting and covered in glowing lichen, permanently trapped down here by the Mad Mage.
I draw my quarterstaff. Who was waiting for me on the deck of that ship?
Standing on the ruined quarterdeck, illuminated by the eerie glow of the lichen, is the architect of the theft. It is an Alloon. If we delve into the lore found in Monsters of the Multiverse, an Alloon is a creature born of sheer tragedy and desperate ambition. It is an Illithid mind flayer that attempted to undergo the horrific ritual to become a lich in order to escape the dominating control of its colony's elder brain.
But it goes wrong.
But the magic of the ritual is flawed for Illithids. It failed. Now, it exists as a horrifying rogue undead entity. Its purple flesh is sloughing off its skull, its tentacles are desiccated, and it clutches a glowing, flawed phylactery. But despite its decaying form, it retains its terrifyingly high intelligence, its devastating psychic attacks, and it now wields incredibly potent arcane magic. It has an armor class of 15, meaning it's easy to hit, but it is phenomenally dangerous if it hits you.
Amon leaps from the water onto the rotting, slippery wood of the main deck. Roll initiative. Let's say the Alhoon's supernatural reflexes win this one. The undead creature acts first.
The Alhoon looks down at you from the elevated quarterdeck, its dead eyes burning with cold arcane light. It raises a decaying, tentacled hand and wordlessly unleashes an arcane bolt. This is not a psychic attack. It is a raw, concentrated spear of destructive magical energy. It makes a ranged spell attack against your AC of 20. Let's look at the die roll. It rolls a 14. With its high spellcasting modifier of +8, that brings the total to a 22. It hits. The bolt strikes you dead center, dealing 8d6 force damage. It's a massive concussive hit that could easily vaporize a huge chunk of your 45 hit points.
But I refuse to absorb that damage. I use my reaction to execute my ultimate defense. I trigger deflect attacks. Now, a common misconception is that monks can only catch physical projectiles, arrows, crossbow bolts, or thrown daggers. But the 2024 rules explicitly state that deflect attacks can be used against any Y attack roll that deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage.
Let's look closely at the monster stat block, though. The Alhoon's arcane bolt doesn't deal bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. It specifically deals force damage. Under the base rules, deflect attacks wouldn't apply here. Does Amon's playbook offer a solution to this?
Well, let's consult the playbook. Yes. If we look at the specific features granted by certain monastic traditions or advanced elemental attunements, the rules expand. Because Amon is walking the way of the elements, his playbook outlines a specific interaction. His elemental attunement allows his deflect attacks feature to interact with raw magical energy, provided it is delivered via an attack roll. Narratively, he isn't catching a physical object. He is using his elemental focus to catch and ground out the kinetic force of the spell itself. I roll my deflection. 1d10 plus my dexterity modifier, which is 5, plus my monk level, which is 6. That's 1d10 plus 11. Let's say I roll an 8 on the d10. I reduce the incoming force damage by a massive 19 points.
The Alhoon rolls average damage on its 8d6, let's say 28 points. You reduce it by 19. You still take 9 points of force damage, but you have turned a potentially lethal strike into a manageable blow. Describe how Amon catches a spell.
The spear of arcane energy streaks across the deck. Amon snaps his hands up, his palms glowing with elemental light. The raw magical force slams into his forearms. He is pushed back several inches, his boots sliding against the wet wood of the deck, but he doesn't break. He crushes the spell between his palms, condensing the raw energy into a jagged, vibrating shard of hard light, absorbing the brunt of the impact.
That is awesome.
And because my deflect attack successfully reduced the damage, I can utilize my energy redirection feature. I spend one focus point. I take that condensed shard of raw force energy I just got, pivot, and hurl it directly back at the Alhoon. The undead mind flayer must immediately make a DC 16 dexterity saving throw.
The Alhoon is a creature of immense intellect and arcane power, but it is ultimately a rotting corpse. It lacks physical agility. It rolls poorly and fails the dexterity save. It takes 2d8 plus 5 force damage as its own spell is violently blasted back into its chest, shattering several of its desiccated ribs.
Now it is Amon's turn. It's time to end this. I am initiating the Arctic Elbow Lock sequence. I need to close the distance immediately. I sprint up the rotting wooden stairs to the quarterdeck. Free action. I shift my elemental attunement, this time selecting cold damage. Before I strike, I use my action to cast Elementalism, Beckon Earth. I target the space immediately around the Alhoon's head. I pull the heavy, ambient moisture hanging over the subterranean lake and instantly freeze it, creating a sudden localized bloom of thick, obscuring frost directly over the Alhoon's dead, bulbous eyes. It's a momentary, non-damaging distraction, blinding it for a fraction of a second.
The undead creature hisses, a horrible wet sound. Its tentacles flail wildly as the sudden frost completely obscures its vision. It drops its guard, trying to swat the ice away.
Which is exactly the opening I engineered. I move in for my attacks, utilizing an Eskrima-style martial arts flow. I don't just throw standard punches. I step completely inside the Alhoon's long, dangerous reach. I grab its outstretched arm, the same arm it just used to cast the spell, and use it as a physical lever. I apply an overwhelming, devastating joint lock, channeling my elemental cold damage directly from my hands into its rotting joints. I strike the elbow specifically to shatter it, forcing the creature violently backward. I am triggering my push effect, requiring a saving throw.
It fails the save. The sheer physical leverage you applied, combined with the paralyzing, freezing elemental energy, completely overwhelms its brittle physical frame. You force the creature 10 feet backward across the quarterdeck. It loses its footing and crashes violently into the ship's massive, rotting mainmast.
As it hits the wood, the intense elemental ice I injected into its joints reacts. As the ice begins to melt, it shifts corrosively into acid, a byproduct of my elemental mastery, violently eating into its arcane robes and rotting flesh.
It's a devastating, highly technical combination of martial arts leverage, spatial control, and elemental magic. But looking at this sequence, I have to ask a critical question from a tactical perspective. The Alhoon is a genius-level intellect. It possesses a signature ability called Mind Blast.
Right.
This ability fires a massive 60-foot cone of pure psychic energy that requires an intelligence saving throw to resist. It completely bypasses your high armor class, and it bypasses your ability to use deflect attacks. Why on earth didn't the Alhoon open the combat with that ability instead of firing an attack roll?
That is the ultimate tactical question, and the answer lies entirely in what Amon did before the combat even started. Remember the study action I used during the bugbear ambush? As I entered the cavern and saw the ship, I used my insane 135-foot mobility to stay completely out of range while I scouted the environment. I recognized the creature was an Illithid variant. I knew its capabilities. I knew the exact 60-foot range of its devastating Mind Blast cone. I intentionally positioned myself at a distance of 65 feet or behind heavy cover on the lower deck, deliberately baiting it. I presented myself as a target just outside of its ultimate weapons range, forcing it to rely on its secondary, ranged spell attack, the Arcane Bolt.
Oh, that is smart.
I did this because I knew my deflect attacks could counter an attack roll. Once it wasted its action firing the bolt, I used my massive speed to close the distance instantly and lock it down in close quarters melee, where it cannot fire an area of effect cone without catching itself in the blast.
It is a brilliant game of spatial geometry, and Amon played it perfectly. You baited the opponent, neutralized their most dangerous ranged option, and dominated the close quarters exchange before they could adapt. The Alhoon's physical form is entirely shattered against the mast. Its body dissolves into a puddle of foul-smelling slime, and its glowing phylactery clatters uselessly to the rotting deck. You have secured the treasure, survived the grueling gauntlet, and achieved the final goal. You take a long, deep breath, collect the heavy stone key, and prepare for the long, arduous climb back up the well to the yawning portal.
We did it. What a harrowing descent. Looking back at the sheer scale of what Amon accomplished today without a long rest, it really changes how we view resource management in this game. Players so often feel this creeping anxiety that they need to take a long rest after every single skirmish to get all their hit points and spells back. but Amon just ran a massive gauntlet of 6 distinct lethal encounters.
And he survived by expending his focus points with surgical efficiency. He didn't blow all his resources on flashy damage in the first fight. He relied heavily on zero-cost reactive abilities like his retaliate opportunity attacks. He leveraged his innate, resource-free, high mobility, and he utilized incredibly smart spatial positioning. It proves definitively that you do not need to constantly rest if you truly understand the mechanical depth of your playbook. You can mitigate incoming damage, control the battlefield geometry, and survive long stretches on short rests if you play tactically.
Speaking of rests, I briefly want to highlight a variant rule from the Dungeon Master's Guide that completely alters this economy. Gritty realism. In standard play, a short rest is 1 hour of downtime. But under gritty realism, a short rest takes a full 8 hours, and a long rest requires 7 consecutive days of inactivity. I want you to think about how much deadlier this exact descent into Undermountain would have been under those punishing rules.
Oh, it would be a nightmare.
Amon would have had to ration those 6 focus points across days of in-game time, carefully weighing every single punch rather than burning them over a few hours. It heavily emphasizes how crucial it is to clarify exactly which rule variants your DM is running before you finalize your character build.
Strategy is entirely dependent on the parameters of the world. You have to know the rules of gravity before you jump. But as we reflect on Amon's journey today, I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly unsettling thought. We just spent this time watching Amon dismantle physical traps with geometry and defeat ancient undead horrors using kinetic physics and elemental magic. He actively changed the dungeon environment to suit his needs.
He absolutely did. He built staircases out of solid light and turned ambient dungeon moisture into blinding acid. He mastered the space.
He mastered the physical space, yes. But consider the psychic resonance of his astral knowledge feature. To gain his profound proficiencies, Amon constantly opens his mind, reaching out into the astral plane to absorb the memories of ancient warriors and the psychic echoes of his environment. In a place like Undermountain, a dungeon utterly saturated with Hallister's ancient madness, the lingering psychic stain of mind flayers, and the chaotic aura of demon lords, what happens to a monk's mind when they absorb the memories of a trapped, insane dungeon for too long? Does the monastic discipline hold the darkness at bay, or does the madness slowly, inevitably seep in? Next time you sit down to play, ask yourself, is your character changing the dungeon, or is the dungeon changing them?
That is a chilling thought to walk away with. The mechanics on the page might be clean and predictable, but the narrative reality of the dungeon can get very dark. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the theater of the mind. Keep your blades sharp, keep your focus clear, and we will see you next time.